U.S. blockade on Iran, on Iranian ports. And so far, what we've seen from China, yesterday, the Ministry of Defense said that they don't care about the blockade. Their tankers going to pass through the Strait of Hormuz because they see Iran in charge of the Strait of Hormuz right now, and Iran is allowing them to get there. And
Yes.
the other point was today we've learned a Chinese tanker, which was under sanctions, by the way, from the United States, passed through the Strait of Hormuz. How do you see the situation with the blockade?
Two ways. First of all, in military terms, what the US side has walked away from in Islamabad is the attempt to say, we've put our terms on the table, it's take it or leave it. We'll come back to the ambiguities and the domestic politics and what Vance has done is distinct from the others around Trump. But Trump is trying to emphasize that the US has escalation control and that by imposing a US blockade on the Hormuz Strait, after the US had proposed in the negotiations to share the toll of the Hormuz toll with Iran, that's another element of what the Americans tried to do in Islamabad. This isn't the Iranians said, we're not going to share the Hormuz toll with you, and we'll come back to that. That was a bribe that Trump was trying to create. We'll come back to that in a minute. Putting the blockade announcement up is an attempt to say the US now controls the Hormuz Strait. And they failed to show that when they sent the two destroyers in as the negotiators started. That attempt boomeranged, the destroyers had to turn around and back out. Now, as you say, two Shadow Fleet tankers have come out of the Hormuz Strait, one from Sharjah, one from, let me see where the other one came from. One came from Bushehr, one from Sharjah. So I wasn't aware of the Chinese Defense Ministry statement. That's a positive indication that China will not allow the US to intercept and will defy the blockade. President Xi Jinping has just told the Spanish Prime Minister that that the world is now facing a contest between justice and power, that the way a country treats, I'm reading it, treats international law is its vision of order, values, and responsibility. Principled nations that uphold justice and are willing to stand on the right side of history. So the Chinese are beginning to say more explicitly than they have before that they will not allow the US to dictate the blockade. If the blockade fails, however, as an attempt by part of the Trump administration, the question then becomes, do they escalate to some of the much more aggressive measures that were anticipated before they went into the negotiations? That includes an attack on Karg Island, destroying Iran's capability to load oil from Karg Island. We can come back to those provisions too. So that the ball is bouncing back into Trump's court to see if the US want to escalate now in order to demonstrate it has escalation control and take that initiative away from Iran. Iran, for the time being, retains the initiative. Let's see what happens next.
Yeah. John, what is your take on what has happened in Islamabad in first round of negotiations? Because just yesterday or today, we've learned that there may be some other in the next round of negotiations they may have on Thursday in Islamabad. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but at least we have these sort of rumors coming out about Thursday, the second round of negotiation, direct negotiations with the United States. What has happened during the first round of negotiation, direct negotiations?
I see what's happened a little differently from from other colleagues in this podcast. And I ask our audience to understand that what happened has to also be interpreted in terms of US politics. What are US politics right now? Why was Vance there? Why did he walk away? Why did he said it, not simply the Iranian side has reported it. Vance made a number of telephone calls, including, as the Iranian side has reported, a telephone call to the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. What does that mean? Mohammed Marandi has told you in a very interesting podcast that the Iranian side interpreted that as a failure of the US side to demonstrate it had a clear negotiating mandate. It lacked authority. It interpreted what Vance's telephone calls amounted to as a kind of weakness. This is an understandable interpretation from a negotiating point of view at the table. But from a US political point of view, from the point of view of the midterm elections in 6 months' time, from the point of view of the succession of Trump, Vance was playing US politics. And what does that mean? What did he do? What he did was to show that he was not disloyal to the, quotes, Trump team. Second, he was showing that if the negotiations blow up, if Trump and his other advisors, the Jewish ones, we'll come to what I mean by Jewish in a minute, but Witkoff and Kushner in particular, if they escalate now militarily, and there's a whole list of what they plan to do. It was published in the Washington Post the day before the Islamabad negotiations began. If there's escalation, if there's continued disruption of oil and commodity markets, Vance is saying, I'm not responsible. They are. Now, where is Vance politically? Answer. Vance is the front runner by I've got the current polls. On average, Vance 44? Is now 44% the preferred candidate. Donald Trump Jr., and this is the important one, Donald Trump Jr. is running next at 15% average. The Harvard-Harris poll shows him at 20%, Vance at 42%. Just remember what this means. What it means is that Trump, having the ambition to run again, which is constitutionally impossible to difficult, can only trust his family. That's what this means. The likelihood, in my opinion, of the shape that US politics are taking, especially if the Republicans lose control of Congress in the midterms, is that Trump will not feel safe. His fortune will not feel safe. He will face impeachment and criminal charges. The entire Trump system that he's built, the multi-billion-dollar system that involves Witkoff, Kushner, and the others, that will face jail, courts, jail. The only way Trump thinks he can continue is a dynastic one. Dynastic. That means either Donald Trump Jr. or Eric Trump will be the candidate. And Trump thinks if he throws his support to his son or sons, he can wipe out that margin that Vance has. Now, Vance knows this. And Vance, with a number of others who are either Roman Catholic, Episcopalian in the case of Susan Wild, the chief of staff, these are the Christians. They are now facing a situation in the United States which is unprecedented. And Trump showed where he thinks he's heading with that attack on Pope Leo XIV, with the tweet picture showing Trump as Jesus Christ healing the wounded, and so forth. This is Trump doing something no president of the United States ever did before, attacking 70 million Catholic believers, 70 million of them. There are 70 million Catholics in the United States. There are 7 million Jews. and the Jewish population is more than half Democrat, more than half. The Jewish support around Trump, which is Israeli in base, they are pushing him to escalate against Iran in a way that has brought the Catholics, the Pope, and the Catholic believing community in the United States to threaten Trump. Vance has a chance of capturing that vote, but only if he dissembles, only if he portrays himself as not to blame for what Trump's about to do. So I think that one has to see the Americans behaving in domestic political terms in Islamabad. We can now get to the questions of what happens next. And I agree with you that there were even indications from Vance that he was hoping for another round. Therefore, more negotiations. From the point of view of the Vance political future, from the Trump administration point of view, from public opinion and voter sentiment, keeping the negotiations going is good, is a positive politically. It calms the oil price markets. You can see the markets already diminishing the oil price. The blockade is one of the escalation obstacles to calming everybody down. Having a new round of negotiations improves the calm. It's better for the world, better for the oil price, better politically for Vance. So on the other hand, Netanyahu and the Israelis and the Jewish supporters they have in the White House, led by Stephen Miller, Deputy Chief of Staff, Witkoff and Kushner, among others, they see, they want a maximum war aims against Iran. They basically want to bomb Iran into the Stone Age. They want to, there are 5 or 6 provisions in the Washington Post editorial. No nuclear power at all in Iran. Decapitation of leadership, demilitarization complete, no missile systems, no oil. And these are the provisions that were in the Washington Post editorial piece. They were acknowledged by the Iranian side, as I understand it, as a significant warning of escalation. That's the, let's call it the Witkoff-Miller-Kushner line, and I see the blockade of the Hormuz as a holding action, a temporary action. They see it too. They want to escalate to Trump's previous threats, the argument, the fight against the Pope, unprecedented. It's already brought Meloni, the Italian prime minister, against Trump for the first time, not yet in France, unclear in Ireland. I'm going through the Catholic countries. What's happening in the United States in the Catholic community is completely unprecedented. And therefore, we have to see, if you like, what the future will be is the Jews of the United States versus the Christians. This is a very serious deterioration in the level of civilization, political civilization in the United States. And Trump has triggered this.
Yeah. Does he know what he's doing, John? Is he doing this intentionally, deliberately, or he's just making noises in this sort of chaos without knowing the consequences of what he's doing?
I understand a lot of our colleagues on your program want to say that Trump has gone mad. Psychopaths aren't mad. And you're asking the question, is he out of control? One of the things I invite everybody to do is go to rollcall.com and look at the presidential calendar, look at the White House meetings. What's happening is that Trump is spending more and more time in what's called in the calendar executive time, or a policy meeting. executive time probably means he's upstairs in the residential quarters of the White House with those very close to him. They are family members, almost certainly one or two of the sons, and almost certainly Miller, Stephen Miller. But nobody knows, it's not being leaked yet, who they are. When that happens, if you match it to the timing of the tweets, and these bursts of tweets that occur from Trump during the night, also the spelling mistakes are a giveaway, and the repetitiveness of the tweets. What's happening is at night in the presidential residence, Trump is surrounded by friends and they talk him up, and he gets violent. He is naturally, psychopathically a violent individual. And he's persuaded that this line, which tends to come over in the late hours of the night, if the tweet postings are correct, as actually when the tweets come out, with the spellings that show he did them, this is when he's not by himself, he's with others. And I would have to say it's a mistake to treat Trump as mad then. He is both controlling the others. They are feeding his violence, his interpersonal violence, we know about his sexual violence. We know a lot about the violence that he shared with his father from Mary Trump's book about the way they grew up and the way he bullies others, especially his late brother. So I don't think Trump is mad. I don't think he doesn't know what he's doing. I do think he's impulsive and he's encouraged by some advisors hitherto anonymous. And that's why he produced the picture of himself as Jesus Christ. And that's why, to answer your question, he didn't anticipate how profoundly hostile that the reaction has been in the United States among the believers, for whom that picture was blasphemous. Second, he didn't anticipate how much political and polling damage it took him the next day for Tony Fabrizio, a Catholic, his principal pollster, to tell him how much damage that was doing. And then they pulled the picture. But he's doubled down against the Pope. So he knows what he's doing. He thinks that what he's doing is what the electorate wants. It's a show of his power. I mean, we can get into psychopathic fantasies. We can get into the cartoon world in which they are expressed, but he's not mad. He's a psychopath. He loses control and corrects his mistakes to the extent that others around him advise him. And that's what he did with the picture, but he didn't withdraw the motive. Now, in Italy, his closest supporter in Europe is Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy, and she's faced a storm of criticism for not criticizing Trump and not defending the papacy, the Vatican. But in that country, in Italy, people are making the point. Senior political figures are making the point. Not even Hitler and Mussolini said this about the Pope. And that Pope, Pius, has been accused of significant collaboration in the Holocaust against the Jewish people. So I think the short and the long answer is he's not mad, he's a psychopath. Second, the people around him are advising him essentially on the maximum Israeli military plan. Israeli military plan. The doctrine of the Israelis and the Jewish advisors around him is the Chabad doctrine. We don't need to get into it, but I need to make this point. Chabad, as a Jewish theological doctrine, is much older than Zionism, much older. As a religious doctrine, it advocates the racial, tribal, ideological superiority of the Jewish people and their laws as superior to everyone else's. Trump reflects this view personally. He's not a Chabadnik. No, he's not. There are close advisors like Joshua Gruenbaum who are, and Kushner who is, but not Trump. What is common between them is the notion of racial superiority, intellectual superiority, the superiority of my law, my people over all others. That's a Chabad doctrine. It is older than Zionism. It's a Jewish doctrine that many Jews find repugnant. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that there is religious fervor in Trump or in his advisors. There is religious fervor that's more than Zionist.
Yeah, definitely he sees himself as the center of the universe. That's why even with the Pope Leo, he says that he was chosen because of me. And
yes,
this is beyond, it's some sort of delusional thinking, John, that I don't because this is, on the other hand, we are talking about we're talking about a man that who's the president of the United States. This is important.
yes.
If he was some, little guy in New York dealing and doing his business, it doesn't matter for anybody in the world. But he's the president of the United States, as he sees himself as the only person that matters. It doesn't matter when it comes China, Russia, Middle East, everywhere. I think that's
right. It has happened before. Napoleon clashed with, I believe it was Pope Boniface, but I can't recall the exact name of the Pope at that time. It might have been a Pius, it might have been a Boniface. Pardon me, folks, for not remembering. But between about 1801 and 1809, Napoleon was at considerable loggerheads with the papacy and, in fact, kidnapped the Pope and imprisoned him until the Pope agreed to what's called the Concordat in France. But their fight was a political and constitutional one that had to do with whether France, under Napoleon's proposed new constitution, would be secular and that the church would be subordinate. This time, you put it right, Nima. It's Trump who thinks he's the monarch. Remember, the French monarch who said, "L'État, c'est moi." The state is me. It's me. It's me. And that's what he keeps repeating. He has almost, in historical terms, a monarchical view. And that's what, and he's going to succeed himself with a dynasty, his son. That's what there are historical parallels, yes. But Iran is, let's not focus too much on Trump. Iran has found the way to fight back at this. And that's very important. But it's very important that the Iranian side understand what the Americans are doing must be interpreted as political, domestic political, translates into votes.